Never did I imagine that playing both my PC and older console games on a handheld would be possible, but looks like Asus was able to pull something great with their ROG Ally. Hello and welcome back again to Junkyard Summit, and it seems that I am one of the lucky few to be able to experience the ROG Ally prior the local launch. And before we jump into details, let us do a quick unboxing and what to expect with it. Opening the box, you are greeted by the unit itself together with its 65-watt charger. Flipping the top part, here we have an ROG cardboard cutout that doubles as a stand for your ROG Ally. Pretty bare in my opinion, and I would love if Asus would add some accessories, for example like a wired earphones, similar to what they have been doing with their laptops. But if you are from the Philippines and one of the first 100 buyers of the ROG Ally, you'll get the exclusive travel case and a charger dock, which Asus claims to be of 6,000 Philippine peso of value. First impressions, the design has a very ROG flair to it, and based from my experience with the Steam Deck, the ROG Ally is a little bit more compact as compared to it, but it's a little bit bigger as compared to the Switch or even the Switch Lite. Build quality wise, the ROG Ally is mostly made out of plastic, but in a good way, as it still feels sturdy while still maintaining it lightweight. It also has a textured finish with grooves on the side and back area offering better grip. One thing to note of, it's been with me for 2 weeks now, and I noticed that dirt is very visible on this device with its white color. Plastic yellowing might also occur over time. That is why I pretty much prefer if there is a black or those on the darker shade. Buttons and D-pads are fantastic. It has a nice tactile feedback, while shoulder bumpers are clicky but not light enough to be misclicked. Unfortunately, my review unit suffers a problem wherein the right shoulder trigger gets stuck from time to time, and you'll hear a loud click to sound on the initial press. I asked Asus about this one, and they mentioned that my review sample is part of the early production units and this should not occur in the upcoming retail units. Shoulder bumpers are also great and uses Hall effect sensors for longer durability. I'm looking forward for adaptive triggers in their V2 or later for the Ally, as I really like them on my PS5 controllers. Rear buttons are also included with dedicated shortcuts assigned to it. As for its joysticks, size is good enough with its concave design that fits perfectly on my thumb. I do wish that they used Hall effect sensors as well for longer lifespan and to prevent any stick drift issue. Initially, I was expecting mediocre speakers for the ROG Ally, as usually it is not Asus' strong point with their laptops. But oh boy, I was wrong. The speaker on this device is spot on with solid audio, regardless if you use it for games or just for content consumption. And looks like Asus still hasn't forgotten our wired users with its included dedicated audio jack.
You may have to defeat my 7 evil exes. So what you're saying is we are dating, I guess.
Ports-wise, the ROG Ally comes with their proprietary XG mobile port that can dual as a USB Type-C 3.2 Gen 2 with DisplayPort 1.4 support, a UHS 2 microSD reader for expanded storage, and a 3.5mm audio jack. Under the hood, this uses an AMD Ryzen chip that they dubbed as the Z1 Extreme with 16 gigs of LPDDR5 memory and 512 gigs of SSD. It also features Wi-Fi 6E and BT 5.1 for its wireless connectivity. A much weaker Z1 model is expected to come in the following months for those looking for a cheaper model. Its 7-inch display uses an IPS panel that is 16:9 Full HD with 120Hz refresh rate. And if you're gonna ask me, this is one of the best IPS screen that I have encountered in the market. And actually, numbers don't lie. The ROG Ally manages to pull 98% sRGB, 73% Adobe RGB and P3 with 432 nits of brightness, which works great even on outdoors. OLED might be its next upgrade, but if IPS uses less power, then I'll happily trade it off for longer battery life. The 120Hz refresh rate is really great too in games, but what surprises me more is the huge range for its variable refresh rate. VRR kicks in from 30Hz up until 120Hz, so regardless if you hit the 120 FPS mark or not, you'll still be able to enjoy fluid motion on your games. Software is a major aspect that people should consider when they plan to purchase an ROG Ally. I've been telling people that the Ally should be compared more against the likes of GPD, Neo, and One X Player instead of the Steam Deck, as the aforementioned devices runs a full Windows 11 experience. And in my opinion, the OS itself is its strong point and weak point. You get the full Windows 11 experience for amazing software compatibility, but at the same time, it is really not optimized for a touch or handheld setup. It is not touch friendly, but credits to Asus for trying to streamline everything for an easier navigation experience. In just a click of a button, you can access quick settings to change the power settings, open up a quick OSD, switch control setup, adjust brightness and volume to name a few. While a dedicated button is also included to launch the full Armory Crates SE software, which in my opinion is still inferior as compared to Steam's big picture mode. ACSE feels clunky and slow at times, and I do hope that Asus would allow users to map it to a different program instead. I also really like what they did with the included rear buttons that function as various Windows 11 commands. This includes Show Desktop, Virtual Keyboard, Alt Tabbing, among the few. For the past 2 weeks that I've been tinkering with this device, I mainly played those older game titles including GTA 5 and those retro console emulators. And I think this is one of the strengths of the Ally that gets overlooked. People keep on pushing the Ally to play the newest game titles with the hopes of running it on high settings with good frames. It actually does sometimes, but personally, I'd only consider it if the game is well optimized or has FSR implementation. And I think that the Ally shines best when playing those older AAA game titles and those emulated console games, as there is no way before to relive older games on a handheld format. There are other Linux-based retro handhelds out there, but the Ally was able to run a lot of these consoles with little to no hitch. In my short duration, I was able to enjoy playing games from Game Boy Advance era up until to run exclusive PS2 and PS3 game titles. But moving on to a more technical standpoint, here is what the Z1 Extreme is capable of in terms of its CPU capability as well as a couple of gaming benchmarks. Battery life is something that hits the ROG Ally really hard. The 40 watt hour battery can barely hit 2 hours even with just its 15 watt profile, and it's really hard for me to call something portable if you need to bring a power bank with you all the time. We might see better battery management in the coming months through software and OS optimization, but don't expect to get another extra hour from it. You can extend it by running lower refresh rate, capping frames, or running it at 720p. But then again, you're not getting the most out of your Ally with those settings. So again, if you are someone who needs a handheld device that lasts like a Switch, then this is not for you. Thermal-wise, I hadn't had any issues when holding this unit, as the ROG Ally is crafted to have fresh intake at the back and blow hot air upward, which should be nowhere near your hands. Reported peak temps is at 95 degrees Celsius during turbo, but lowers down as clocks normalizes, and at 15 watts, my temperature only peaks at 73 degrees Celsius with an average of 63 degrees Celsius during gaming. I was not able to test the actual noise in terms of dBA, but so far it is manageable and definitely not a problem, especially if you are using earphones. And finally, let us tackle some pressing concerns and what is my entire take on the ROG Ally. First up is warranty. Based from what the local Asus reps have told me, Opening and upgrading your SSD on your own invalidates your warranty already, and personally, this is a really bad move. 512 gigs of storage is not enough to fit more than 3 games, and most users would want to upgrade their SSD to at least a terabyte one. One could argue that you can add more games on the allotted SD card slot, but here comes the second problem. Various owners of the Ally are encountering dying SD cards, dying SD port, and most are citing it to overheating problems due to the layout of the memory card controller to the CPU. I tried my best to replicate this issue with the unit that I had, but luckily, my SD card is still alive. Right now, Asus already acknowledged the problem and is still investigating it, but I highly suggest to leave it alone for the meantime, hence going back to my first concern. And lastly, more of a minor issue, but if you are a console or a Mac user and just want a straight out of the box handheld gaming, then this might not be for you, as tinkering around both Windows 11 and on your games is required to actually have the best experience. But if you can accept those that I mentioned, then this is a really great gaming device and a good value even here locally. It currently retails for $43,995 and you'll get a full Windows device with amazing specs on a handheld form factor that can easily run a lot of new and old game titles. I do expect that the Ally would also get better in the coming months with BIOS and software updates, as well as those third-party tools that can fully unlock the Ally's potential. And lastly, I can also see this work as a desktop replacement if ever you can attach a XG Mobile to it. And I think that is all for today. What are your thoughts on the ROG Ally? And if you have any more questions, feel free to comment it down below. And I also do plan to do more coverage on the ROG Ally in the coming weeks, so stay tuned. Once again, this is Brain of Junkyard Summit. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.